Kim Tae-ho walked through the massive doors of the Galactic University with his backpack hanging over one shoulder. The building was huge beyond anything he had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling was so high he could not see the top. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires or supports. Students of different shapes and sizes moved through the hallways in ways that seemed impossible. Some students floated like they were swimming through water. Others walked on 6 legs that clicked against the floor with each step. A few seemed to be made of living rock and moved very slowly but steadily forward. Tae-ho had read about alien species in his preparation materials, but seeing them in person was completely different. He looked at the small device in his hand that showed his class schedule. Comparative planetary ecosystems would be his first class, room 847B in the xenobiology wing. The directions on his device showed a path through several corridors and up 3 levels. As he walked, he passed other human students. He recognized them by their familiar shapes and the way they moved. All of them looked as amazed as he felt. Some were taking pictures with their phones while others just stared at everything around them. Park Ji-woo was standing outside the classroom when Tae-ho arrived. She was a student from Busan who had studied environmental science. They had met during the preparation program on Earth but had not talked much. "This place is incredible," Ji-woo said when she saw him. "I have been here for 10 minutes and I already saw a student who looked like a walking tree and another one that seemed to be made of water." "I know what you mean," Tae-ho replied. "Everything here is so different from what we are used to." They walked into the classroom together. The room was designed to accommodate many different types of beings. Some seats were filled with a liquid that allowed aquatic students to breathe. Others were positioned near heating elements for students who needed warmer temperatures. The human seats looked normal but were placed in an area with Earth-like atmosphere. The teacher entered the room and Tae-ho gasped quietly. Professor Veltar looked like a walking crystal formation. Light seemed to come from inside the crystal body and created rainbow patterns on the walls. When the professor spoke, the voice came from somewhere inside the crystal structure but sounded clear and easy to understand. "Welcome, students, to Comparative Planetary Ecosystems," Professor Veltar said. "This semester we will study the most dangerous and unusual worlds in our galaxy. You will learn how different forms of life adapt to extreme conditions." The professor moved to a large screen at the front of the room. Images of different planets appeared one by one. Some worlds were covered in ice. Others looked like they were on fire. A few seemed to be made entirely of gas with no solid ground anywhere. "We will examine worlds that challenge our understanding of what makes life possible," the professor continued. "You will learn about planets with crushing gravity, poisonous atmospheres, and deadly weather patterns." A student near the front of the room raised what looked like a tentacle. The being seemed to be covered in blue scales and had large eyes that could move independently of each other. "Professor, will we study any worlds where advanced civilizations actually live?" the student asked. "An excellent question, Rifan," Professor Veltar replied. "Most of the worlds we will examine are considered too dangerous for permanent settlement. However, we do have one very special case this semester." The screen changed to show a blue and green planet with white clouds swirling around it. Tae-ho felt his heart jump. "It was Earth. This is Earth," the professor announced. "It is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. The conditions on this planet are so extreme that most experts considered it impossible for intelligent life to develop there." Tae-ho looked around the room. Many of the alien students were making sounds that seemed to indicate fear or concern. Some moved away from their seats as if the image of Earth itself was dangerous. A student who looked like living stone spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Professor, why are we studying such a dangerous world? Should we not focus on places where life actually exists?" Professor Veltar's crystal body seemed to glow brighter. "That is exactly why Earth is so fascinating, Boulder Dash. Despite all the deadly conditions, life not only exists on Earth, but has actually thrived there. Some forms of life on Earth have become quite sophisticated." Ji-woo leaned over to whisper to Tae-ho. "They are talking about Earth like it is some kind of death trap. Do they not know that we actually live there?" Before Tae-ho could respond, a floating student that looked like a jellyfish made of gas spoke up. "Professor, what kind of life could possibly survive on such a world? It must be very simple organisms that hide deep underground." "Actually, Driftera, the life on Earth is remarkably complex," the professor replied. "The planet has produced millions of different species. Some of them have even developed technology and space travel. The classroom became completely quiet. Every student was staring at the image of Earth on the screen. Tejo could feel the tension in the room growing. A student with 6 legs and a shell like a giant insect began making clicking sounds. Space travel? From a Class 12 Deathworld? How is that possible? Professor Veltar moved closer to the screen. The beings from Earth call themselves humans. They have not only survived on their dangerous world, but have actually built a complex civilization there. They have cities, technology, art, and science. Some of them have even begun exploring other worlds. Tejo felt all eyes in the room turned toward the human section. The other species had noticed that several students looked exactly like the beings the professor was describing. "Professor," said a student who seemed to be made of living water, "are you saying that some of the students in this class are actually from that death world?" Professor Veltar looked directly at Tejo and Jiwoo. "Indeed, Splasheen. We are very fortunate to have several human students with us this semester. They will provide us with first-hand knowledge of what it is like to live on one of the most dangerous planets in known space." The alien students stared at the humans with expressions that seemed to mix fear, amazement, and curiosity. Tejo realized that his peaceful life on Earth was about to be viewed in a completely different way. He looked at Jiwoo, who seemed just as confused as he was. Neither of them had ever thought of Earth as particularly dangerous. It was just home. But apparently to the rest of the galaxy it was a world so deadly that most life should not be able to exist there at all. The semester was going to be very interesting. The second week of class arrived and Tejo felt more comfortable walking through the university halls. He had learned to recognize different alien species and even managed to have simple conversations with a few of them. Most seemed curious about humans but kept their distance as if he might be dangerous. Professor Veltar began the class by displaying a large chart on the screen. Numbers and percentages filled the display in bright colors. The title read, "Earth Atmospheric Composition." "Today we will examine the most shocking aspect of the Earth death world," Professor Veltar announced. "The atmospheric conditions that somehow allow life to exist there." The chart showed Earth's atmosphere broken down into parts. Nitrogen took up most of the space at 78%. Oxygen filled 21%. The remaining 1% contained various other gases. A sound like escaping steam came from the aquatic student section. Glubnosh was the tide dweller who always sat in the liquid-filled seat near the front. His breathing apparatus was bubbling more rapidly than usual. "Professor," Glubnosh gasped, "that cannot be correct. 21% oxygen? That is practically pure combustion fuel floating in the air." Several other students began making worried noises. The stone singers started clicking their protective shells, and what Tejo had learned was a sign of nervousness. Their home planet contained only 3% oxygen, and even that was found safely underground. Lee Hyun-soo raised her hand. She was another human student studying astrophysics. "Excuse me, but what exactly is wrong with our atmosphere? We breathe it every day without any problems." The entire classroom fell silent. Every alien student turned to stare at her with what looked like complete shock. Some of the floating students drifted backward as if trying to get away from something dangerous. Professor Veltar's crystal body dimmed slightly. "Miss Lee, most civilized worlds maintain oxygen levels between 8 and 12% maximum. Anything higher creates constant fire hazards and causes rapid aging through oxidative stress. But we need this much oxygen to live properly," said Choi Min-ji from the back of the room. She was studying chemistry, and had always been good at explaining scientific concepts. "Our bodies are designed to use oxygen to create energy. Without enough oxygen, we become weak and dizzy." To demonstrate her point, Min-ji reached over and turned off the emergency oxygen supplement that was attached to her translator device. The device was meant to provide extra oxygen if the classroom air became too thin for humans to breathe comfortably. The reaction was immediate. Several alien students activated their personal safety protocols. Boulder Dash pulled his rocky limbs closer to his body. Driftara began floating toward the emergency exit. Reef On's scales changed from blue to a dark purple color. "Please put that back on immediately," Professor Veltar said urgently. Breathing such concentrated oxygen without protection could cause serious harm. Minji looked confused. "But Professor, this is just normal air for us. We breathe this concentration of oxygen all the time on Earth. In fact, when we go to high mountains, the oxygen gets thinner and we have to work harder to breathe." She took several deep breaths to show that nothing was wrong. Each breath made the alien students more nervous. To them, she was casually inhaling what they considered to be a dangerous chemical mixture. Splash Een spoke up from her water tank. How do you avoid constant fires? On my world, even a tiny spark can cause explosions if oxygen levels reach 15%. Teho decided to help explain. We do have fires sometimes, but we have learned to control them. We actually use fire for many things like cooking food and heating our homes. Some people even make fires outside just for fun. The classroom erupted in shocked sounds. Students began talking among themselves in their own languages. The universal translator struggled to keep up with all the different conversations happening at once. You deliberately create fires? Asked a student whose name Teho had not learned yet. The being looked like a collection of moving metal parts, in an oxygen-rich atmosphere. For entertainment? Well, yes, said another human student named Bae Do-hyun. He studied geology and enjoyed outdoor activities. We call it camping. We sit around fires, cook food over them, and tell stories. It is very relaxing. Professor Veltar displayed a new chart showing atmospheric pressure readings. Let us move on to another aspect of Earth's dangerous atmosphere. The surface pressure on Earth measures 14.7 pounds per square inch. More shocked sounds came from around the room. The floating students looked especially disturbed by this information. Wispara drifted closer to her emergency pressure suit. That pressure reading is equivalent to living in the deepest ocean trenches of most worlds. How do you function under such crushing force? Do-hyun laughed, not understanding why this was concerning. We do not feel crushed at all. That is just normal air pressure for us. In fact, I enjoy deep-sea diving where the pressure gets much higher. Last summer I went down to 100 feet underwater. The alien student stared at him as if he had just claimed to survive being crushed by a mountain. Wispara immediately sealed herself inside her pressure protection suit. 100 feet underwater, she repeated through her suit's communication system. That represents a pressure increase that would kill most galactic species instantly. Professor Veltar brought up images of Earth's mountains. Humans also travel to high altitudes where the air pressure becomes much lower. They climb mountains that reach heights where most spacecraft begin their atmospheric exit procedures. Yoon Soo-jin spoke up from her seat. She was studying sports science and had always been athletic. I love mountain climbing. The views are amazing when you get really high up. The air gets thinner, but it just means you have to breathe harder and take more breaks. You voluntarily enter low-pressure zones, said Boulder Dash slowly, where the atmosphere becomes too thin to support most life forms. And you do this for enjoyment? Of course, Soo-jin replied. Exercise and challenges make us feel good. Climbing mountains is great exercise, and the sense of achievement when you reach the top is wonderful. The alien students exchanged looks that seemed to combine fear with a growing respect. They were beginning to understand that humans did not just survive Earth's dangerous atmosphere. They actually enjoyed pushing themselves into even more extreme conditions. Professor Veltar's crystal body glowed brighter. Class, we are witnessing something remarkable. These humans live comfortably in atmospheric conditions that would represent emergency survival situations for most of us. And they seem to seek out even more challenging environments voluntarily. As the class ended, Teho noticed that the alien students were looking at the humans differently than before. There was still curiosity in their expressions, but now it was mixed with something that looked almost like awe. He was starting to realize that his normal life on Earth might not be as normal as he had always thought. Week 3 brought new revelations that made the alien students even more amazed by their human classmates. Professor Veltar had prepared a special demonstration about gravity and pressure that would change how everyone in the class thought about Earth. The professor activated a gravity simulation device in the center of the classroom. A small platform rose from the floor and began generating different gravity fields. Numbers appeared above it showing the strength of gravity being produced. Today we will explore how gravity affects life on different worlds, Professor Veltar announced. Let us begin with the gravity levels that most civilized species consider normal and comfortable. The device showed 0.4 g, which was about 40% of Earth's gravity. The floating students seemed more relaxed and moved more easily through the air. The walking students appeared to bounce slightly with each step. This is the gravity level on my homeworld, said Rifan, the blue-scaled aquatic student. Most advanced civilizations develop on worlds with gravity between 0.3 and 0.6 g. These levels allow for easy movement and do not put stress on biological systems, Professor. Veltar increased the gravity slowly. At 0.6 G, some students began to look uncomfortable. The floating students had to work harder to stay in the air. At 9.8 G, several students activated support systems built into their seats. Most medical experts agree that 0.8 G represents the maximum safe gravity for long-term habitation, the professor explained. Anything higher causes bone density problems, circulation issues, and shortened lifespans for most species. The gravity reading continued to climb. At 0.9 G, Wispara sealed herself into her pressure suit completely. At 1.0 G, the stone singers began making distressed clicking sounds. "Professor," Boulder Dash said with effort, "please reduce the gravity field. These levels are approaching emergency survival conditions." Professor Veltar looked toward the human students. "Actually, Boulder Dash, we have just reached the standard surface gravity of Earth. This is what our human students experience every moment of their lives." The alien students turned to stare at the humans in disbelief. Tejo and his fellow humans were sitting normally, showing no signs of distress or discomfort. They looked as relaxed as they always did. Bae Do-hyun stood up and walked around normally while the gravity simulator showed 1.0 G. "This feels completely normal to us," he said. "We grew up in this gravity, so our bodies are used to it." Glubnash was breathing heavily through his apparatus. "How do you function? Your bones must be incredibly dense. Your muscles must be enormously strong just to move around." "I guess we never thought about it," said Han Nari, who was studying atmospheric sciences. "This is just how things are for us. We run, jump, and play sports in this gravity all the time." To demonstrate, Nari did a few jumping jacks. The alien students watched in fascination as she lifted her entire body weight against Earth's crushing gravity, over and over again. What looked like normal exercise to her appeared to be an incredible feat of strength to them. Professor Veltar increased the gravity demonstration to 1.2 G. Most alien students were now using emergency support systems. Some had activated distress signals. "At this level," the professor said, "most galactic species would experience organ failure within hours. The heart cannot pump blood effectively against such gravitational force." Kwon Jae-hyun raised his hand. He was studying meteorology and had always enjoyed physical activities. "Actually, Professor, some humans train in higher gravity than normal. Athletes sometimes use centrifuge machines that create up to 3G or 4G to make their regular training more effective." The silence in the room was complete. Even Professor Veltar's crystal body seemed to dim with shock. "You voluntarily subject yourselves to gravity levels that would kill most beings instantly?" asked Splasheen through her protective water barrier. "Well, only for short periods," Jae-hyun explained. "But yes, some pilots and athletes train in high gravity to make them stronger and more resistant to G-forces during rapid acceleration." Professor Veltar turned off the gravity simulator and the alien. Students sighed with relief as conditions returned to normal, but the lesson was far from over. "Now let us discuss pressure differentials," the professor continued. "We have already established that Earth's surface pressure is equivalent to deep ocean conditions on most worlds. But humans also travel to locations with even more extreme pressure variations." Images appeared on the screen showing deep ocean scenes from Earth. Fish swam past underwater, mountains and valleys that disappeared into darkness. "Oh," Sejun spoke up from his seat. He was studying marine biology and had always loved the ocean. "I have been scuba diving many times. Last year I went down to 130 feet. The pressure down there is about 5 times normal surface pressure." The aquatic students made sounds of distress. Even Glubnash, who lived in water, looked shocked. 5 times surface pressure," Rifon repeated. "That would crush our breathing organs instantly." "How is your body not destroyed by such forces?" "We use special equipment to help us breathe," Sejun explained. "But our bodies handle the pressure just fine. Some professional divers go much deeper than that. The world record for deep diving is over 1,000 feet. Wispara began floating toward the exit. 1,000 feet underwater? That is not diving. That is falling into a pressure hell. How do you return to the surface alive? Very carefully and very slowly, Sejun said with a smile. But people do it all the time. There are whole industries built around underwater work and exploration. Professor Veltar displayed more images showing humans working underwater, repairing structures, and exploring shipwrecks. To the alien students, these looked like scenes from the most extreme survival expeditions imaginable. Humans also travel to high-altitude locations where pressure drops to dangerous levels. the professor continued. The screen showed mountain climbers on Earth's highest peaks. Lim Ha-young stood up to share her experience. She studied botany but loved hiking and climbing. I have climbed several mountains over 10,000 feet high. The air gets thinner, but you just have to pace yourself and stay in good shape. 10,000 feet, Boulder Dash said slowly. That is higher than most spacecraft fly when leaving a planet. How do you get enough oxygen to survive? Sometimes we bring extra oxygen tanks for the really high climbs, Ha-young admitted. But many people climb those heights without any special equipment. Your body adapts after a few days. The alien students were beginning to understand that humans did not just survive Earth's extreme conditions. They actively sought out even more challenging environments for sport and recreation. Let me understand this correctly, said a student Tae-ho had not heard speak before. The being looked like a walking plant with many branches. You live at the bottom of a gravity well that would crush most species. You regularly travel to pressure zones that represent certain death to most life forms, and you do much of this voluntarily for entertainment. When you put it that way, Tae-ho said thoughtfully, I suppose it does sound pretty extreme, but it is just normal life for us. Professor Veltar's crystal body glowed brighter. Students, we are observing a species that has not just adapted to extreme conditions, but has actually thrived in them. The humans appear to be biologically designed for survival in environments that challenge the limits of what most life forms can endure. As the class ended, Tae-ho noticed the alien students whispering among themselves and pointing at the humans. The looks of curiosity were being replaced by something that seemed closer to respect. Mixed with fear, he was beginning to understand that Earth might be a much more dangerous place than anyone had told him growing up there. The fourth week of class brought discussions about weather systems, and Professor Veltar seemed particularly excited about the topic. The crystal professor's body was glowing brighter than usual as students filed into their seats. Today we will examine the most violent and unpredictable aspect of the Earth Deathworld, Professor Veltar announced. Weather patterns that would be classified as natural disasters on most civilized worlds occur regularly on Earth's surface. The screen displayed Earth's temperature ranges in bright red and blue colors. Numbers showed the extreme temperatures recorded on different parts of the planet. Earth's surface temperatures range from -89 degrees Celsius to +57 degrees Celsius, the professor stated. These represent the most extreme temperature variations found on any planet known to support complex life. Shocked gasps came from around the room. Driftera began floating rapidly in circles, which Tae-ho had learned was a sign of distress in her species. Professor, she said through her communication device, those temperatures would represent catastrophic climate disasters on most worlds. How does anything survive such extremes? Park Ji-woo raised her hand to respond. Actually, we have cities built in both hot and cold areas. Millions of people live in places that regularly experience those temperatures. We just adapt our clothing and buildings to handle the conditions. The alien students looked at her, as if she had claimed people lived inside active volcanoes. Boulder Dash made a grinding sound with his rocky limbs. You construct permanent settlements in zones that experience temperature variations that would kill most life forms? Well, yes, said Lee Hyun-soo. I grew up in a city where winter temperatures often dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. We just wore warmer clothes and heated our buildings. In summer, it would get up to 35 degrees and we used cooling systems. The concept of deliberately living in such temperature extremes seemed to break something in the alien students' understanding. Several activated their environmental protection systems even though they were in the safely controlled classroom. Professor Veltar brought up the next topic that would shock them even more. Now let us discuss precipitation. On Earth, water falls from the sky in various forms as a regular occurrence. Images of rain, snow, and hail appeared on the screen. What looked like normal weather photos to the humans caused visible panic among several alien species. Glubnash's breathing apparatus began working overtime. Water falling from the atmosphere? How do land dwellers survive such flooding conditions? Rain is actually very important for life on Earth, explained Han Nari patiently. Plants need water to grow, and rain provides water for drinking and agriculture. Most areas get rain regularly throughout the year. But the flooding, insisted Rifan, his scales shifting to a worried dark blue color. Surely such massive water volumes destroy all surface structures? Nari looked confused. Most rain is not that heavy. It just falls steadily and soaks into the ground or runs into rivers. We actually enjoy gentle rain. Many people find the sound relaxing. The screen changed to show images of heavy storms with sheets of rain falling from dark clouds. Some regions of Earth receive over 400 inches of rainfall annually, Professor Veltar stated. This volume of precipitation would completely submerge most continental civilizations. Splasheen spoke up from her water tank, and even she sounded concerned. 400 inches? That much water volume falling from the sky would create permanent flood conditions. How do you prevent your cities from being washed away? We build drainage systems and design our cities to handle the water, said Choi Minji. Some areas do flood during heavy rains, but we usually just wait for the water to go down. People have learned to live with seasonal flooding in many parts of the world. The casual way she described surviving regular floods left the alien students speechless. They were beginning to realize that humans treated catastrophic events as minor inconveniences, but Professor Veltar was not. Finished with weather-related shocks, Earth also experiences what humans call severe weather events, the professor continued. Let us examine hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical storms. Video footage of hurricanes appeared on the screen. Massive spiral storm systems covered huge areas of Earth's surface. Wind speed measurements showed numbers that made every alien student activate their emergency protocols. Hurricane winds can exceed 200 miles per hour, Professor Veltar explained. These storms carry enough energy to power most planetary civilizations for years. How do you evacuate entire continents when such storms approach? Asked Wispara from inside her sealed protection suit. Kwon Jae-hyun laughed without realizing how his response would sound. We don't evacuate continents. Most people just prepare their homes and wait for the storm to pass. I have lived through dozens of hurricanes. You just stock up on food and water and stay inside until it's over. The alien student stared at him in complete silence. The idea of casually surviving storms that could power civilizations was beyond their comprehension. What about tornadoes? Professor Veltar asked, displaying footage of spinning wind funnels destroying buildings. Those are more dangerous, admitted Bae Do-hyun. But they are usually pretty small and only last for a short time. Most people never see a tornado in their whole lives. We have warning systems that tell people when to take shelter. You have warning systems, repeated Boulder Dash slowly, because atmospheric weapons of mass destruction randomly appear in your sky. Well, we don't usually call them weapons, Do-hyun said thoughtfully. They are just weather events, part of living on Earth. The final shock came when Professor Veltar showed footage of lightning. Storms, electrical discharges from Earth's atmosphere can carry over 1 billion volts of energy, the professor stated. These strikes occur millions of times daily across the planet. The screen showed lightning, bolts striking the ground while humans continued their normal activities in cities below the storms. Sujin shared her experience. I love watching lightning storms. They are really beautiful, especially at night. As long as you stay indoors or in a car, you are usually safe from lightning strikes. Usually safe, whispered Rifan. You watch billion-volt electrical weapons firing randomly from the sky and consider yourselves usually safe. Some humans actually chase storms for scientific research and recreation, added Oh Se-jun. Storm chasers drive toward tornadoes and hurricanes to study them and take photographs. This final revelation seemed to break the alien students completely. Several began making distress calls in their native languages. Others activated full environmental protection systems as if the mere discussion of Earth weather might somehow affect them. Professor Veltar's crystal body was now glowing so brightly it was hard to look at directly. Students, what we are witnessing is unprecedented in galactic academic study. The humans live on a world where natural disasters occur as routine weather patterns. They do not flee from these conditions. They prepare for them, survive them, and some even pursue them for entertainment. Lim Ha-young decided to add one more detail that she thought might help explain things. Actually, many people choose where to live based on the weather they prefer. Some like hot climates, others prefer cold. Some enjoy places with lots of storms, while others prefer calm weather. We have learned to live comfortably in almost any weather conditions Earth can produce. The alien students sat in stunned silence, trying to process the idea that humans not only survived atmospheric warfare on a daily basis, but actually had preferences about which types of atmospheric warfare they enjoyed most. As class ended, Taeho overheard conversations between alien students in their various languages. Even without perfect translation, It was clear they were discussing humans with a mixture of awe, fear, and growing respect. He was starting to understand that what he had always considered normal weather patterns were apparently viewed as survivable apocalyptic events by the rest of the galaxy. The humans were no longer seen as delicate exchange students but as representatives of a species tough enough to thrive in conditions that would represent emergency survival situations for most galactic civilizations. Week 5 arrived and the alien students entered the classroom with visible hesitation. Word had spread throughout the university about the shocking revelations in Professor Veltar's class. Other students from different courses had begun asking the humans questions about their mysterious Deathworld. Professor Veltar's crystal body was glowing with an intensity that suggested great excitement. About the day's topic, today we explore the most terrifying aspect of the Earth Deathworld, the professor announced. The biological organisms that somehow coexist with human civilization. The screen displayed microscopic images that looked harmless to the human students, but caused immediate panic among the aliens. The images showed various types of bacteria magnified thousands of times. We begin with Earth's smallest life forms, Professor Veltar continued. Bacteria that can survive in boiling water, freezing temperatures, pure acid, and even the vacuum of space. Shocked gasps came from around the room. Several students activated their sterilization protocols. Professor, said Splasheen from her protective water tank, surely these extremophile organisms are contained in special research facilities far from populated areas. Kim Tae-ho raised his hand to respond. Actually, we live with bacteria all the time. There are trillions of bacteria living in and on every human body right now. Most of them help us digest food and stay healthy. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Whispera sealed herself completely in her environmental suit. Boulder Dash pulled all his limbs close to his rocky core. Driftera began floating rapidly toward the air filtration systems. You deliberately maintain colonies of extremophile organisms inside your bodies? Asked Glubnash through his breathing apparatus, which was now working at maximum filtration levels. We don't really think of it as deliberate, said Park Ji-woo. The bacteria are just naturally part of how our bodies work. Without them, we would get sick and die. Professor Veltar displayed new images showing Earth's ocean life. The first image was of a blue whale swimming peacefully through the water. Earth's oceans contain creatures that exceed 200 tons in mass, the professor stated. These beings are larger than most species' spacecraft. The aquatic students looked especially disturbed by this information. Reef On's scales had turned completely black, which indicated extreme fear in his species. 200 tons, he repeated slowly. Are these creatures hostile predators? Oh, Sejun smiled as he answered. Blue whales are actually very gentle. They eat tiny shrimp-like creatures called krill. I have been swimming near whales many times. They are amazing to see up close. The alien student stared at him in disbelief. You voluntarily enter the water with creatures larger than starships? Asked Splasheen. How do you avoid being consumed? They don't eat humans, Sejun explained. But I have also swum with some predators like whale sharks and great white sharks. You just have to be careful and respectful of them. The mention of sharks caused several students to activate emergency communication systems. Professor Veltar displayed images of various shark species with their teeth clearly visible. Great white sharks can exceed 20 feet in length and possess rows of razor-sharp teeth, designed for tearing flesh, the professor explained. They are apex predators of Earth's marine environments. And you swim with these killing machines voluntarily? Asked a student whose name Tae-ho still did not know. The being looked like a collection of floating crystals similar to Professor Veltar, but smaller and more colorful. Well, shark attacks on humans are extremely rare, Sejun said. You are more likely to be struck by lightning than attacked by a shark. Most sharks are not interested in eating humans. The casual mention of lightning strikes as a comparison point reminded everyone of the previous week's discussion about Earth's electrical storms. The alien students were beginning to understand that humans measured danger differently than most species. Professor Veltar moved on to land animals. Images of bears, lions, tigers, and other large predators filled the screen. Earth's land surfaces are populated by numerous apex predators, the professor stated. Many exceed several hundred pounds and are equipped with claws and fangs capable of penetrating most organic armor. Lee Hyun-soo decided to share her experiences. I grew up in an area with black bears. We would sometimes see them in our backyard looking for food. You just make noise to let them know you are there, and they usually leave you alone. You share residential areas with armored predators equipped with natural weapons? Asked Boulder Dash. They are not really armored, Hyun-Soo corrected. Just furry. And most bears avoid humans unless they are protecting cubs or are really hungry. Professor Veltar displayed images of venomous snakes and spiders. The bright colors and warning patterns made several alien students move toward the exits. Earth also hosts numerous creatures that produce biological toxins, the professor explained. Some spider venoms can cause paralysis or death in larger organisms. Bae Do-hyun raised his hand. Actually, most spiders are really helpful. They eat insects that would otherwise become pests. I have several spiders living in my house that help control mosquitoes and flies. You maintain colonies of venomous arachnids in your dwelling? Asked Wispara through her suit's communication system. I wouldn't call them colonies, Do-hyun said. They just live there naturally. Most house spiders are too small to hurt humans anyway. The discussion moved to plant life, which the aliens assumed would finally be less threatening. Professor Veltar displayed images of Venus flytraps capturing insects. Even Earth's plant life can be predatory, the professor announced. Lim Ha-young stood up excitedly. Oh, I love carnivorous plants. I grow several varieties as a hobby. Venus flytraps, sundews, and pitcher. Plants are all fascinating to watch as they catch insects. The plant-like alien student in the corner began making distressed rustling sounds. You cultivate predatory flora for recreational purposes? The plant student asked. Do you not fear they might develop a taste for larger prey? They only eat small insects, Ha-young assured everyone. Though I do have to be careful not to trigger the traps too often. Or the plants will get tired, Professor. Veltar displayed images of massive trees that towered hundreds of feet into the air. Earth's plant life can also achieve enormous size, the professor stated. Some trees exceed 300 feet in height and can live for thousands of years. I love hiking through old-growth forests, said Han-Nari. Being surrounded by trees that old makes you feel connected to history. Some of those trees were alive before human civilization began. The alien students were struggling to process the idea that humans found it relaxing to walk among giant organisms that had been alive for millennia. Let me ensure I understand correctly, said Rifan, his scales now shifting between black and deep purple. Your planet hosts microscopic extremophiles, oceanic giants, terrestrial apex predators, venomous arthropods, carnivorous plants, and ancient tree beings. And humans coexist peacefully with all of these organisms. We don't exactly coexist peacefully with all of them, admitted Kwon Jae-hyun. Some animals are dangerous and we try to avoid them. But most of Earth's life forms either ignore humans or actually benefit from having us around. Professor Veltar brought up a final set of images showing domestic animals. Dogs, cats, horses, and cattle appeared on the screen. Remarkably, humans have formed symbiotic relationships with modified versions of these dangerous creatures, the professor explained. Yoon Soo-jin smiled widely. Those are our pets and livestock. Dogs and cats live in our homes as companions. Horses help us with transportation and recreation. We raise cattle and other animals for food and materials. You have domesticated the apex predators, said Splasheen in amazement. You have turned the monsters of your world into allies and resources. I wouldn't call dogs and cats monsters, Soo-jin laughed. My cat is about 8 pounds and spends most of his time sleeping in sunny spots. My dog loves playing fetch and swimming in the lake. The alien students sat in stunned silence as they tried to process everything they had learned. Humans did not just survive on a world filled with dangerous organisms. They had somehow convinced many of those organisms to become their friends and helpers. Professor Veltar's crystal body was now glowing so brightly that students had to shield their visual sensors. Students, we are witnessing something that challenges our understanding of biological relationships, the professor said. Humans have not conquered their world's dangerous life forms through superior strength or technology. They have integrated with them, domesticated them, and in many cases learned to appreciate their beauty and complexity. As class ended, Taeho noticed that the alien students were no longer just amazed by humans. There was something approaching reverence in their expressions. They were beginning to see humans not as lucky survivors, but as a species that had somehow become the diplomatic masters of one of the most dangerous biological systems in the known galaxy. He was starting to understand that Earth's incredible Diversity of life was apparently unique in the universe, and humans' ability to thrive alongside all of it was even more remarkable than he had ever imagined. The final week of the semester arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation that filled the entire university. Word about Professor Veltar's class had spread beyond the xenobiology wing. Students from other departments had requested permission to observe the final session. The classroom was packed with beings from dozens of different species, all eager to witness the conclusion of the most talked-about course in galactic university history. Professor Veltar entered the room with a crystal body glowing brighter than anyone had ever seen. The light patterns dancing through the professor's form suggested both excitement and something approaching awe. "Students, we have spent 5 weeks examining the impossible conditions of Earth," Professor Veltar began. "We have studied atmospheric composition that should prevent complex life, pressure and gravity levels that should crush most organisms, weather patterns that should destroy civilizations, and biological systems that should create constant warfare between species." The accumulated data appeared on the screen in a massive display that showed Earth's various extreme conditions side by side. Temperature ranges, atmospheric pressure, gravity measurements, storm intensities, and images of dangerous creatures filled every available space. Yet through all of our study, one question has remained unanswered, Professor Veltar continued. How do humans not just survive these conditions but actually thrive in them? The alien students leaned forward in their seats, protective equipment and floating positions. This was the question that had been building throughout the entire semester. Rifan raised his tentacle-like appendage. His scales had gradually shifted from fearful black to curious silver over the past weeks. "Professor, we have observed that humans seem to treat deadly conditions as normal circumstances. They do not appear to struggle against their environment the way most species would." "An excellent observation," Professor Veltar replied. "Let us hear directly from our human students. How do you explain your species' remarkable adaptation to such extreme conditions?" Kim Taeho looked around at his fellow humans, then stood up to address the packed classroom. "I think we might have been looking at this backwards all semester," he said thoughtfully. "We do not just survive Earth's challenges. We chose to live this way." Confused sounds came from around the room. Several alien students activated their translation devices to make sure they had understood correctly. "What do you mean you chose this?" asked Glubnash through his breathing apparatus. Park Jiwoo stood up to help explain. "Earth's conditions did not happen to us. They made us who we are. Every challenge our planet presented, our species learned to overcome. We did not just adapt to survive lightning storms, we learned to harness electricity for power. We did not just avoid dangerous animals, we domesticated them and made them our partners." The revelation was starting to dawn on the alien students. Professor Veltar's crystal body pulsed with increasing brightness. Lee Hyun-soo continued the explanation. "When Earth gave us crushing gravity, we developed strong bones and muscles. When it gave us extreme weather, we learned to build shelters and predict storms. When it gave us dangerous creatures, we learned to coexist with them or make them our allies." "You are saying that Earth's deadly conditions created advantages rather than obstacles?" asked Boulder Dash, his rocky form shifting with amazement. "Exactly," said Bae Do-hyun. "Humans have spread to every continent on Earth, from frozen Antarctica to scorching deserts. From deep ocean floors to high mountain peaks, there is no environment on our planet too hostile for human habitation if we decide we want to live there." The alien students began talking among themselves in excited voices. The universal translator was working overtime to keep up with conversations in dozens of languages. Choi Min-ji decided to share something that would shock them even more. "We do not just live in extreme environments. We seek them out for fun. People climb mountains that have killed previous climbers just for the challenge and the view from the top. Others dive to ocean depths that would crush most spacecraft. Some people even jump out of aircraft with only fabric parachutes to slow their fall." "You deliberately seek out life-threatening situations for entertainment?" asked Wispara from her sealed protection suit. "We call it adventure," said Oh Se-jun with a smile. "Challenges make us feel alive. Overcoming difficulties gives us a sense of achievement. Many humans are happiest when they are testing themselves against Earth's extremes." Professor Veltar displayed a new image showing human cities from around Earth, settlements in deserts, mountain communities, floating cities on water, and research stations in polar regions. "Students, observe these human settlements," the professor said. They have not just adapted to extreme environments, they have thrived in them. They have built civilizations in locations where most galactic species could not survive even with advanced technology. Han-Nari stood up to add another perspective. We also learned that working together makes us stronger. When hurricanes threaten our cities, neighbors help each other prepare and rebuild. When earthquakes damage our communities, people from around the world send aid. Earth's challenges taught us to cooperate. So the deadly conditions of your world actually made your species more united? Asked Splashin. In many ways, yes, replied Kwon Jae-hyun. We learned that we are stronger together than alone. Humans will travel across the planet to help. Other humans survive natural disasters or dangerous situations. The alien students were beginning to understand something profound about human nature. Limmy. Hae Young decided to share the most important realization. I think what we are trying to say is that humans are not victims of our death world. We are its ultimate success story. Every impossible challenge Earth presented, we met and mastered. We did not just learn to survive our planet, we learned to love it. You love your death world? Asked the plant-like student whose species came from carefully controlled greenhouse environments. Of course, said Yoon Soo-jin. Earth is beautiful. Its storms are magnificent. Its mountains are inspiring. Its oceans are full of wonders. Its creatures are fascinating. We would not want to live anywhere else. Professor Veltar's crystal body was now glowing so intensely that the classroom's light sensors were automatically dimming to compensate. Students, we must revise our understanding completely, the professor announced. Humans are not somehow surviving despite Earth's conditions. They are thriving because of them. Earth did not create a hostile environment that humans endure. It created the perfect training ground for producing the most adaptable and resilient species in known space. The alien students sat in stunned silence as the full implications became clear. Every challenge that would represent an emergency survival situation for most galactic civilizations is simply normal life for humans. Professor Veltar continued. They breathe poisonous atmospheres, live under crushing gravity, survive atmospheric warfare, and coexist with dangerous predators because these conditions shaped them into beings capable of thriving anywhere. Taeho looked around at his alien classmates and realized they were no longer seeing humans as fragile exchange students. There was genuine respect in their expressions, mixed with something that might have been awe. Professor, said Rifan, if humans can survive conditions that would kill most of us, and they actually enjoy seeking out even more extreme challenges, what does that make them in galactic terms? Professor Veltar's response would become one of the most quoted statements in xenobiology academic history. It makes them the apex species of a Class 12 death world, the professor said. They are not just survivors. They are masters of survival itself. They have taken the most hostile planetary conditions in known space and turned them into advantages. The classroom erupted in excited discussion. Students from dozens of species were talking rapidly about the implications of this revelation. As the semester officially ended, the alien students approached the humans with new questions. But these were no longer questions about how they survived impossible conditions. These were questions from beings who wanted to learn from the most successful survival species in the galaxy. Would you be willing to teach us about adaptation techniques? Asked Boulder Dash. Could you show us how to build resilience into our civilizations? Asked Whispera. Would it be possible to visit Earth to observe your survival methods in action? Asked Glubnash. The humans looked at each other and smiled. Taeho spoke for all of them. We would be happy to share what we know, he said. But you should know that what we consider a gentle introduction to Earth might be more challenging than you expect. What do you mean? Asked Splashin. Park Ji-woo grinned. Well, we were thinking of starting with a camping trip. You know, sleeping outdoors under the stars. Cooking food over open fires, hiking through forests, maybe some swimming in natural lakes. The alien students stared at them in amazement. What the humans described as a peaceful camping trip represented a survival expedition into hostile territory filled with uncontrolled fires, dangerous predators, unfiltered atmosphere, and unprocessed water sources. But for the first time since the semester began, the alien students looked excited rather than terrified. When do we start? Asked Rifan. Professor Veltar's crystal body glowed with what could only be described as pride. The semester had ended.